Thanks for joining us. I'm Trevor Cameron, our general manager here. Say hi to Nicole. She's back there on the green screen running the show. She's back today to help.
Good morning.
Thanks everybody for joining us. September 11th is always a tough day for many people. So hopefully we remember the important things today too, but try to be happy, and we'll talk about some plants and do some container gardening here for fall. So we're going to go fast and furious like usual. I brought in way too many things. You can see me surrounded by plants, and we will try to get through it all. Before I forget, as I usually do, sheet. So if you should have received this with your email for the class, if you need it, we can email it to you. Go on our website, it's on there. But that'll give you kind of a quick little description of some of the main points we're going to talk about today, as well as some good plant suggestions for sun, for shade that we can use in a container. When it comes to container class, we kind of do this in the spring. We do it again in the fall. If you're like me, we always kind of revamp our summer containers here for the fall winter season. Then we flop back over in April, early May, and do it for the summer season. So this is kind of a class we do twice a year, but the basic principles never change. If I look at a container, we call it the thriller, the filler, and the spiller. That's a really easy way to remember, to me, the three great components of container design. You want something that's going to catch your eye, not mine. Something you enjoy is your thriller, some cool textures, some cool foliages, some interesting plants to you that we can use for fillers to eat up that space in the container, and then some things to spill over the edge to create a little interest, bloom, foliage, again, whatever your taste is in your pot. So try to remember those three things. It's kind of funny as people come in after class, it's usually like, hey, Trevor, show me a thriller. So we'll try to find you something cool that you like. You know, when it comes down to it, any plant can grow in a pot. So, I mean, if you're a plantophile, a plant addict like me and many others around here, I could pick any plant on the property and grow in a container for some extent of time. So, I mean, this could be any plant we have on the property, you know, sun, shade, part sun. You know, again, we can always grow it in a pot for a while. Some things a little faster, don't last as long as a container. Other things grow slow, don't mind being a little bit root bound, and could last for a number of years in a large container as well. So keep that in mind, that nothing is off the table for containers. That's an easy one for plants. You know, revamping the summer pot, I kind of mentioned, you know, this is the time of year for me in my own yard. Yes, I have some planters that are strictly annuals. Yes, I swap them out and do pansies and some fun stuff for the winter. But a lot of my main containers have something permanent in them. I wanted a shrub. Oh, excuse me, a shrub, a conifer. That hasn't happened yet. We got the radio on. Something that I like there for a number of years that I can take out, geranium, petunia, whatever I had in the summer, remove those, do a little bit of root pruning, add some fresh soil, tuck in my pansies, violas, cabbage, kale, mums, and whatever you like to enjoy here. As we head into fall, those are all the things we can do this time of year very, very, very easily. Okay. I would always consider some permanent elements. You know, I would never talk you out of coming down and buying everything brand new twice a year for your pot. It's certainly good for business, but we don't have to necessarily. You know, pick out something you like as even a centerpiece, replace the rest spring, fall. You know, and then you're not having to do quite as much, because there's a lot of choices again for things that we can enjoy for quite a few seasons in a pot without having to revamp and do the entire container over again. You know, this time of year, you know, we're getting into the, you know, fall. We've got some dew, we've got a little cooler weather. Sure, we still got summer left here. I'm not giving up yet. We'll have some nice weather here for another month or two. But as we start to get into winter, you know, it's berries, it's bark interest, it's different foliage, it's evergreens, maybe some twig color, you know, again, on a little simple plant like Twig Dogwoods, something that, again, will catch your eye and make that container pop here over the dormant season. We've got lots of options, and I'll show you a few plants today. You know, again, I'll say it probably 10 times. You know, I'm the OCD, matchy. I like yellow. I like this. I don't like pink. You know, this is not my pot. This is your pot. So you need to exercise your own style. Get what catches your eye. It may be totally different from me. That's fine. That's why plants come in all shapes and sizes and colors. We can find something that'll be perfect for what you want to do in your own container. Okay. You know, the first thing we'll start with is kind of potting soil. Now, we want to use the proper potting soil when we're setting our container up. You know, we do EB Stone organics here. I think the best soils on the market. Edna's best potting soil. Always easy to spot. Yellow bag. You know, all organic, indoor, outdoor, great drainage. It's a great soil to use as a good all-purpose potting mix. I can plant really anything straight into that as a container mix. Someone's going to inevitably probably ask in the chat, well, I just revamp my whole pot. Can I chop up all the old roots and leave the soil in there and just throw a little plants on top? No, if the soil's tired, just like we talk about in ground plantings, the better the soil, the better my plants are going to grow. So if you have old tired potting soil, let's get it out of that container, replace it with a fresh bag. You're going to see a huge improvement in how these things grow here fall, winter, and going into 2022. Now that's neutral potting soil. I'll show you a couple others. This is a pretty pink bag, and what's on there? Azalea, Camellia acid mix, rhododendron, conifers, blueberries. This is what I use for my potted blueberries. This is a potting soil that I can plant straight into or use it as amendments. So let's just say you're choosing to plant a little conifer as a specimen here, or something that prefers acidic soil. Sweet. Maybe instead of getting Edna's, let's get a bag of the acid potting soil. That'll make that plant happier, a little easier to grow, as long as, again, we're utilizing acidic soil or acid-loving plants, okay? To me, the third option is, and kind of one that I've done for quite a few years, is, you know, I'm a Japanese maple addict, amongst many other things. So I have a lot of pots with maples in my own yard. I'll buy potting soil, EV Stone organic planting compost, and I will mix usually 2/3 potting soil, 1/3 compost, and kind of make my own little blend. It drains real well, still got some good moisture retention, but the maples seem to be happy in a mix like that as well. You can even throw a little bit of bark in there as well for drainage and some air circulation. Okay, so good soil will always be the key to a good pot. So kind of consider your options and absolutely replace the old tired potting soil if it's gotten to that point. We need to get some fresh soil to have happy plants going for the next phase of the container. Okay. Now we talk fertilizing. Now I'm not into speed feeding here in the fall. We're not going to probably pump on the Miracle Grow. We're not going to get something real heavy water soluble. September is okay, but as we start to slow down and things go partially dormant, yes, we want our containers to look fresh and the plants in our yard, but we don't need to overfeed them. So when I'm setting up a container here, honestly, spring or fall, I'm always going to use a couple of organic fertilizer options. Now for me, these are the two I swear by. I'll typically put a cup of EV Stone rose and flower food and mix that in with the potting soil as a base mix, plant my plants, maybe sprinkle a little bit on the top in between the plants, finish off the container, water it in, and off we go. If you really want to keep things blooming, a lot of times I'll incorporate maybe half a cup of this Ultra Bloom. That's pure phosphorus, all about flowering, buds, and flowers. So if I mix those two together, to me, I've got an ideal planting mix. The plants are going to be happy. They're going to stay fresh and green through the winter, but I'm going to help my pansies, my violas, maybe some other things that I want to bloom consistently over those winter months. That's going to keep the root systems happy and keep me flowering a little bit too, okay? But we don't need to walk out once a week, you know, and power down on the Miracle Grow or whatever your favorite water soluble is. We usually use a product called Seagrow here, and certainly I use it a little bit in September, but once I swap in and we really cool off, it's time just to use a little organic granular, and we'll start using that water soluble come spring again. We'll warm up. So fertilizer, you know, maybe if you were going to go back, say you did these containers, you know, this weekend or next weekend, maybe you go back in 6 weeks or so, sprinkle a little bit more of that rose and flower food in the pink pouch, sprinkle that on there. That's your dose maybe once every 6 weeks here during the dormant season. Then when we go back to spring, now we can do it a little bit more regularly, okay? You know, consider your pots. You know, pots come in all kinds of materials, frostproof, wood, plastic, fibercrete, you know, whatever your style is. Again, terracotta will typically crack and disintegrate around here at some point when we get cold, but all the rest of those are great pots to have outside year round. We do more frostproof here at the nursery typically. I'll show you a couple here in a minute that I mocked up. Something I can buy as long as I don't drop it or the kids don't drop it. I'm going to have it forever. It's never going to crack, never going to break. A long-term investment that I can always use in my yard over and over and over again as the years go by, okay? Pot risers or pot feet. Now, nothing's worse than doing a cool container, tucking it up on your brand new deck or your new stone walkway, and you walk out a year later and you got a big circle stain or you left that pot on the ground. Again, we want to make sure water drains out of these containers, and elevating it off hard surfaces is a great way to go. I use pot risers, which I'll try to show you. They're little black squares. Now I could put these down underneath my container, put my container right on there. You can't tell they're there. It just levitates my pot that much off the ground. But now my drain hole stays free. I get great drainage over the winter. I don't have to worry about overwatering, especially around our neck of the woods with the consistent rain going to start here at some point. I can have it outside, rain all you want. Whatever extra water's in there is going to drain through my drain hole properly. So pot risers is one option. These hold hundreds of pounds. So don't look at them and think, well, that's going to squash if I put my giant pot on it. I've got huge pots. These will hold anything. The other option, you know, there's all kinds of fun pot feet, and I brought one of our favorites in here. We call them the bottoms up. So that's kind of a fun one. You can see little ledge I can set my container on. I get sets of 3 of those. And again, I can levitate my container off a patio, a deck, with something a little more fun or decorative if you like to. So if you're not into the bottoms up, there's plenty of other options out there as well. That's kind of a fun one that we like here at Sunnyside. Okay. Ups the daisies, I just want to show you now. This looks like a, you know, orange frisbee golf. I'm going to go here, throw it across the yard and watch it spin. But this is what we call ups the daisies. I can get these in all kinds of circumferences, smaller, bigger than this. If I've got a giant container and I want to plant permanent plants in there and enjoy them for years, I want soil all the way to the bottom. I want to make that clear. I'm not going to cheat my plants, put this in and fill it half with soil. That's just going to make my plants run out of gas sooner. I'm going to have to redo the container. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So if I'm putting in a maple, a conifer, something like I do, that I want to grow for a number of years and then swap out things around it as the seasons go by, great. I'm not going to get something like this. Now, let's say you on the opposite end are like, nope, I like mine fresh in summer, fresh in the fall. I'm going to take everything out, and I don't want to fill a gigantic container full of potting soil. Save a little bit of money. I only need, you know, this much soil to grow pansies all winter, or something else that you might enjoy for a season and then start over again next summer. So this is a little disc that I can slip down in my container by getting the right size, and I could go 1/3 of soil or 1/2 of soil and save myself a little bit of money. I've got all the drainage built in there. The water goes right through, nothing changes, but I just don't use quite as much soil. Okay, so that might be a consideration again if you're not going for something permanent or long-term. Now, if we look at one more thing probably to mention here that I would watch for in the fall is slugs. You know, we're notorious for the little creepy, slimy guys crawling around and mowing down our plants here in the fall. No different than containers. They'll gladly find their way up the side of one and hang out there all winter and just keep eating away at the pansy foliage and whatever else you got to feed them with. So watch for the slugs this time of year. We've got Sluggo on special here in September, $14.99 for the big 2.5 pound pouch here of old-fashioned Sluggo. This is pet safe, people safe, doesn't hurt anything. If I planted a fresh container here in the fall and I know I maybe have some slug issues like most of us do in our neck of the woods, I might put a little rim of this around your container. That way Mr. Slug runs up the side there. They cross the iron phosphate, all natural. You will get the slug without hurting anything else. So consider a little bit of slug bait in the container as well. I would say particularly if you're planting in shade, that's usually where they're going to hang out a little bit more. So watch that. Now, if we kind of get into the plant side of this, let's see what I'm doing for time. Oh, I'm doing great today. If we kind of get into the plant side of this a little bit, you know, I started off by kind of smiling and joking. You can plant any plant in a container, and isn't that the truth? So I'm going to show you some specific things that I like for fall, but you could come down here and we could probably show you anything on the property, you know, as far as something we could add to a container, something that catches your eye. When you're looking at making your choices, you know, an easy way is come down here and talk to the staff. Let us help you, advise you on what goes with what and things that like the same kind of environment. We can help you be successful designing a great container. We've got some fabulous staff down here. But basically, you know, I want to start with sun and sun. I'm not going to mix sun with shade. That's an easy one I'm hoping for everyone to realize I'm going to struggle long-term if I have a full sun plant and I add something that likes full shade. One of them is going to struggle and one's going to be happy depending on where my container is located. So try to get like with like when we come to sun versus shade. Watering needs to me is huge. You know, I'm going to have to water my container maybe a little bit in the winter. Say it's underneath the eave, you know, not getting rain. Yes, I got to check it. Maybe it's once a week or maybe twice a week at the most, but I got to make sure it's watered. If it's out in rain, I'm probably okay, but I have to make sure I have things that like all dry together or maybe a little bit more wet together. I'm always going to drain well, but, you know, maybe as an example, let's say I put, you know, some sort of little evergreen, a bunch of sedums around it. You know, if I water the middle plant, the thriller, to make it happy, I'm going to rot out my sedums because they like it much drier. So we just got to keep the watering in mind and get something that goes, again, like with like is always the easy way to succeed. You know, for me, being a plant addict, plantophile, whatever you want to call it, I'm always adding cool things in the pots that I want to have in my yard down the road. So that's another maybe consideration for you as you pick a thriller, some filler, some different things that you're going to make this fabulous new fall container. Sweet, I can enjoy this Moonfrost hemlock here in my container for the next 3, 4, or 5 years. It's happy as can be. And at that point, I can take my hori knife, my scissors, my little shovel. I can carefully dig that out in the winter and go plant it in my yard. Now I got a shrub that's really cool that I can grow long term. Go pick out another plant that I can grow in that pot. So that's kind of how you feed your addiction, a cycle. If you're like me, always got an empty pot around, there's always something cool to put in it. Okay. You know, one thing I try to tell people, and it sounds kind of elementary and it's a good trick, but you know, let's say you wanted to come down here today, you know, find me, find the staff, you know, you got a pot sitting behind the house, it's been there for 7 years, you're like, God, I should probably do something with that. Now you got motivated here at this class, let's put some fun plants in there for the winter. You know, who wants to haul a 150-pound container into their car, drive it down the nursery, take a chance of breaking, all the rest? Save yourself some time. I tell people to take a piece of cardboard out of your recycle bin, set it on that pot, just draw a circle, draw a square, whatever the rim of that container is all that we care. You bring that cardboard down here, now we can draw you a map, you know. Put the cardboard down the table, set the plants on a cart. Well, let's do a circle here. Here's what we're putting in the middle. Here it goes there. That goes there. Here's some spillers. Now you go get your plants. You've got a little map to take home and go, okay, where did we want to put that again? And it's an easy way to me to do a little container design without getting too crazy. So if you think about it, you can measure it. You can do what you want. It's easy with circles, but sometimes pots have some fun shape to them. You know, take a piece of cardboard. It's an easy way for you to bring it with you, and we make a little map for you that way. Okay. Always, like I said, always come down and help, you know, ask for help with the store. We got great staff here. It's not just me. You know, we got lots of good plant people here that can help you pick out some really cool plants that for your taste that will make you happy here as we get a little darker and grayer and gloomier here going into winter. Okay. If just real quick, I'll show you a couple mock-ups and we'll talk some plants. But if I've got a typical plant here, someone inevitably asks at the end, you know, what do I do to it before I put it in the container? We're not going to rip it in half. We're not going to divide this stuff. We're going to grab a plant. Let's just take Mr. Mum here because fall is all about Mr. Mum. I usually kind of gently squeeze the bottom, carefully slide it out, and I look at that root mass. Now, if I look at that Mum, it doesn't matter. It's a little root bound. It's got a healthy root system. It doesn't mean, oh, I don't want that. This is a very happy plant, just getting ready to start to bloom. But what I want to do is either carefully with my fingers, or a lot of times I'll grab my pruners. I'm not going to dig in and rip this thing in half and destroy it. It'll probably crash out. But if I'm kind of careful and I go around the edge and I just loosen up those surface roots a little bit before I pop that in the container, now the root system's got all free soil to grow in, and I've got a plant that's going to establish. Sometimes you put them in like that. It's so used to growing in a circle, might take a little longer to kind of root out there and get established. So try to rough up the roots a little bit. Sometimes with pansies, we just started getting cool pansies in because that's my favorite winter happy plant. You know, these aren't too rooted out at all. You can see. So I probably wouldn't do anything to those. But if I got pansies the same way that maybe had a little bit of surface root, sometimes I'll just pick my fingers and just pinch off that bottom little ½ inch of soil completely. That opens it right up, and then I can pop that in. and off they go, okay? Now, if I just show you a couple, I'm hoping you can see this in the camera. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I went silent there for a minute. We still good, Nicole? All right. So if I show you a couple planters here, you know, I just this morning, I picked out a few things. We got a whole bunch behind me, but I just kind of made up a sun and a shade, you know, just some things. If you were down here like, hey, I got a little pot, or I want to buy a pot, I'd like it to look cool for the winter. Here's just a couple ideas for you. So if I look at this one, see if we can lift it up here, and I'll show you. This is a heavy one though. So that's a big black pot, and you can see some cool colors in there. Now this is for shade, and if I kind of move it a little bit towards the camera here, we can look on the side, and I'll just kind of, this isn't planted. I put some burlap in there and cheated so it looked like it was, but I'll just show you some of the things you put in there. So here's a little conifer. This has got white tips called Moon Frost. It's a little hemlock called Moon Frost. Give me some white color. Obviously it's evergreen in the shade, something bright. I think it contrasts nicely with the black pot. But there's just one example of a little shady or morning sun type conifer that I could have in there for a number of years. There's my thriller. You know, then I put a couple fillers in here, like Leucothaway. This is a little new Leucothaway, curly red, twisting red. There's all kinds of great little evergreen Leucothaways for that part shade area. These will turn red, the foliage here for the winter months, but they won't drop their leaves. So I can walk out there and see some nice color on the leaves of a Leucothaway and have something evergreen. Same with Berginia, old elephant ears. You know, that's a great one for shade. Large leaves, nice foliage, great texture. Turn some red, some burgundy in the winter. I get some spring flower on it. That's another one that I could have for a while. You know, we're almost into hellebore time here. You know, the Lenten rose, there's all kinds of cool hellebores, but I think every shade container should always have a hellebore in it. That's a great option for an evergreen perennial that actually blooms in the fall through the holidays into next March and April, depending on which variety I choose. So this is a fall bloomer. This will give me white flowers on a little clumping evergreen perennial that will be blooming November, December into January. So right in the middle of winter, when we don't have a lot in color, that's a great choice for those part shade. So there's some fillers. Now I look at some spillers, some things. I kind of designed this to go up against a wall by my front entrance or something where I see the height, the next stage, and then I've got some things spilling out the front. So if we use plants like vinca, ivies, all kinds of choices of some colorful leaves or green, if you're not into variegation, these are things I can tuck along the edge that will just kind of spill over and accent the side a little bit. Every winter pot should have winter green. You know, that's an evergreen that'll mound over the side. You can see the berries coming out right now. There's where your wintergreen gum comes from. But we would have those bright red berries and a whole bunch of this coming in next week, including some really cool variegated forms as well. And then in the front there, just for a little flower power, it's always pansy or viola. You know, I thought about putting white pansy in there, but then there's a whole lot of light colors, so I popped it with a little tiny bit of lavendery pink. But pansies or violas, this is the flower if you want actual flower through the fall, winter, spring. These will, I don't care how cold we get. Mine turn to ice cubes and cold nights look like they're frozen and dead, and then next day it thaws out, and oh, here comes some more flowers out. So pansies is the one thing I buy a lot of in the fall because I want to look out and see some flowers in the containers, the window boxes, different areas in my own yard. That is typically what I'll invest a little bit more for flowers over the winter too. So there's just a little demo shade. If we look at the sun one over here, see if I can pull this one up. You can see again, kind of some different colors, some different textures going. This is a really cool pot, by the way. We call these boiling glaze. I think they're like little art pieces. They're frost-proof pot, but they've got all kinds of fun, kind of psychedelic colors going. We got all kinds of fun ones out there, different tones if you like a little different pot. So this is, again, sun. And if I look at this, back in the back, I've got my thriller. This is what we call mountain pepper or drymies. That's a tall shrub. That'll last in there for a couple years. Move it out to my yard. But that's got beautiful red stems. Got some nice flower power on that come springtime, but this one's really about the structure, the foliage, and I think the red stem color is really striking over the winter months. Hookura is my other must-have plant. for pots. You know, I took the little kind of peachy colored one in this container, but I could pick any color in the rainbow of Hookuras and add something purple or lime or red or orange, all kinds of options. And the nice thing with Hookuras, you can see quart, you know, or let's see, my plan is my container is much bigger. I can buy them in gallons. So I can have 2 different size Hookuras and pick, maybe this is my thriller. If you like Hookuras like me, maybe that's the big one in your pot and we do smaller things around it. But very easy to tuck in a quart or a 4-inch, save a little money, but also have the Evergreen Perennial and the foliage color you want. You know, I could have easily went for a different color on the Hookuras and popped a little purple in there. This is one called Forever Purple. You can see really striking foliage on that one. Same thing, evergreen, moundy, nice color in the wintertime, all season, but especially in the wintertime as well, okay? This one here, we threw a little grass in. So if I look on the side here is a spiller, a beautiful variegated carex called Feather Falls. This is one with long blades that will kind of hang over my pot and act like a spiller. It's not flowering, but it's got great color and great texture. You know, pansies, I love my orange. So there's your Delta Fire. There's a little pansy. And then wire vine is another option. You know, just something green and easy that I can plant on the edge and let that grow down. And again, spill off the edge and create a little bit of interest during the whole growing season. You'll see the purple that's in flower there right in the front, just a little fall color. Now that's an aster, which are always a great choice here for fall. Asters, and we looked at mums. Again, lots of colors in the rainbow for those. As long as I'm cool with that blooming here for a month or two, when we start to get frost, those will go dormant and die to the ground, but then they would come back up next spring as a perennial. So I'm okay with maybe that one thing disappearing in the winter, and then I'll see you again next year kind of deal, okay? So that's just an easy, you know, kind of a demo for sun and for shade. And I'm just gonna show you, you know, again, I think I've said it twice already, any plant can grow in a container. So I'm going to show you kind of a few things that you might consider specifically for fall. You know, we could go through hundreds of shrubs and conifers and maples and all kinds of things, but here's some things maybe specifically for fall that would give you a little bit of winter interest, okay? So here's a few. This is what we call floral berry or Hypericum. These are shrubby Hypericums. You can probably see the beautiful little berries on there. These just finished blooming yellow. I can pick lots of color berries from white to pink to red to black, orange. We've got all kinds of options, but this is a great little shrub that would show off these floral berries here as we go through the fall. Now we get into winter, these go dormant, we chop them off, we see you again next year. It's a hardy little shrub. But if I'm specifically looking at fall here for the next 6-8 weeks, that's a great choice to add a little bit of interest. I mean, I could tuck this container, it pops with the Hookura. I can use it in a lot of different places. So Hypericum, or a lot of people call that floral berry. That's a great little option for fall. Some really cool heathers. You know, a lot of these garden girl heathers or gallery heathers, lots of different options for color. This is something evergreen. It likes sun, doesn't need a lot of water. But you can see the flowers on here will last for a number of months, and there's a lot of options of these kalunas or Scotch heathers that start to bloom in September and go into the fall to early winter. And then again, I'm not going to lose this. This would be something I could have again for next year. So the heathers might be one, especially if you like foliage colors. A lot of options with golds, reds, oranges, still bloom, but maybe have a little foliage color pop if you like those colors as well. Ornamental peppers. Now this is one we always see in a lot of our containers in fall. You can see the bright peppers coming out there. You know, this is one that's an annual. This will last until we get real cold, you know, typically well into November or so. But this is one that we would just pitch out in the fall at some point. We get cold enough, it'll let you know, I'm done, I'm tired. Send me the great compost deep in the sky. Well, then we can pop a little pansy in or something different at that point. But peppers would be one, again, great fall interest, bright color, nice little fruit, certainly a great little filler or accent plant that you can use for a fall container as well. Now, I'm always brutally honest, if you know my classes, and this is not my favorite, but it could be yours. This is your pot, not mine. Cabbage and kale. Now, we just started getting these in. We're starting to get cold enough. I think you're okay planting these out in the yard for the winter. or using them as, again, containers. It's not my favorite, like I said, but it could be yours. It's a really cool foliage plant if you like the look of the cabbage and kale. You got pinks and lavenders and whites, different amounts of laciness on the foliage, short compact cabbage. You know, these are ones that will go through the entire winter and give you some great foliage color. And if you're going to, you know, you got about 6-8 weeks here where you're going to have great selection of this kind of stuff that you can get in your containers, get in the ground. Then these aren't around again until next fall. So this is one we can only do here as we head into the cold season. So cabbage and kales. I mentioned pansies and violas, so I won't bring those up again, but that is my flower power. If I want actual flower all through the winter, November, December, January, February, I don't care what month it is, that's what I'm going to add for color. Zillions of options. You know, you could pick a pansy viola, just about any color in the rainbow. And that, again, that catches your eye and pops with the other combinations you've got going in your containers, okay? Now, a couple things. If we were going to show you a couple other options for maybe some shady things, okay? You know, again, I mentioned my many plant addictions. Hookura-itis is one of them. Hookura-itis is close. But here's, you know, another Hookura option. Let's say I'm working on my shade container over here. And again, I want something with really cool foliage color that's evergreen and not going to disappear in the winter. Look at Hookuras and Hookurellas. This is one called Stoplight. I'm going to have bright lime green with that beautiful red streaking in the center. You know, that's going to pop off through the winter in whatever combination I put in a nice shade or part shade container. Okay. Ferns. You know, lots of cool evergreen ferns. This is autumn fern, a plant native to Japan. But if you can see the colors, I'm getting some of that russety, orangey red on the fronds that I'll get to enjoy all through the winter months. This is not a fern that's going to die to the ground and start over next spring. This will be an evergreen one. So I could, again, add that into my shade container or part shade container if I like a little ferny texture and some foliage color on there. Lots of cool options for ferns. We looked at hellebores. You know, we're just getting into hellebore season. I had one in the shade container here. They'll take a little bit of sun too, but you'll see more and more of these arrive on a weekly basis here at Sunnyside. You know, maximum selection of hellebores is always in that mid-October to mid-November range. You're going to have a zillion choices of flower colors and foliage. You know, if I look at this one, this is a new one, crystal leaf. Now, if I look at that, look at the silver, the variegation on that. So yes, I'm going to get a nice typical Lenten rose or hellebore flower, but I'm also going to have some really nice foliage when it's not in bloom. So again, part shade, something I can tuck in that's an evergreen. That's a really cool plant to have for fall and winter. Now, if I duck behind me, if we're doing shade still, let me show you a couple more. Now, let's just say, you know, we're not a conifer gardener. You know, I like what he put in that pot, but I'm not much of a hemlock guy. I don't like white. Whatever the reason is, again, this is your pot. Lots of options that I could use for a thriller for that shade container. It doesn't have to be a conifer. It could be a zillion different things. But a couple things I might think about. What about Daphne? You know, there's a great little green evergreen shrub. This will bloom in February, March. It's got great fragrance. You know, if I swap that out in there for the hemlock, I got this by my front door through the winter. I've got something that's colorful, looks good, and then when it starts to bloom, I get to smell it every day when I get home. So if we look at something like Daphne, this is one called Perfume Princess that blooms in the winter and then goes into spring, early summer. Or even, this is always a tongue twister, but something like Sarcococa. We call this sweet box. This is a plant from Asia. Again, evergreen, loves deep dark shade. But I've got flower buds right now up and down all these stems, really small little white flowers. But when this starts to open in January, again, I'm going to get that sweet vanilla fragrance that's going to welcome me home every day. It's a great container plant and something very easy I can move out into my shady landscape afterwards as well. If we're going to go for, you know, the holidays, nothing beats a camellia. You know, camellia is a great evergreen shrub. Yes, they get big down the road. Maybe you've got a large container, but we can start with a small one. And this is a plant that doesn't mind being a little bit root bound, lasts for quite a while in a container. And this is a particular one. You can see the flower on there is red. This is one called Yuletide. So this is a winter bloomer that I would, again, Maybe I don't do the hemlock and I swap it out for Camellia as my thriller. This is one I can have for a number of years in a container, enjoy the red flowers during the dead of winter, and still have something nice and easy and evergreen to grow in the pot, okay? Then let's look at a couple grasses. Now, this is a great example. And you know, again, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a little OCD. I like my matchy-matchy. And yes, I'm stuck in a rut sometimes. I like the same things in the pots sometimes every year. My wife is trying to get me to branch out, which I do a little bit. Not really, but here's two. I probably have every container I might have ever had at my house has got this in it at some point. So this is a grass. You know, I love grasses, the texture, the motion. They're evergreen, lots of cool options for shade, for sun. But I like grasses, you know, in the yard as well. So these will go in the pots and then go to my yard sometime down the road. But this is New Zealand sedge, orange sedge, some people call it. Carex testacea is the plant. But this is a great example. You know, here's the same plant in a gallon and a 4-inch. So I've had some small pots over the years. I'm going to use that for my thriller. And then I put some small stuff around it and I've got a nice looking pot. Maybe I'm the opposite. I look at my sunny container here and I'm like, you know what? I want some grassy texture in there for the winter. Now it becomes a filler. You know, I can use this for either or situation, save a little money, buy a small one, easier to tuck into a big container with a bunch of mixed things. But grasses, I wouldn't forget about because I think the evergreen ones look fabulous over the winter months and we get some cool color on them as well. So that's New Zealand sedge. If we were going to go maybe a little bit more for shade, Halloween's coming, we could do the black Mondo grass. You know, that's kind of a fun little grass. I use a lot of this in the ground at my house, but it makes a great, again, little container centerpiece. Maybe not with the black pot, so I won't show you one of that because you'll get lost. But it pops. It's a different color. You know, I have yellows behind this or bright green. This is really going to pop with the texture. And again, being evergreen, very, very easy to use on the edge of a pot and let it kind of spill a little bit as kind of a spiller on the edge. Sweet flag, you know, maybe you like some bright yellow. Sweet flag is a great one that takes a little more wet, but these will make a great little texture plant with the blades. And again, bright color over those winter months. So that could be something that might want to pop as a little filler in one of my containers. You know, and if you're not into, you know, variegation, you just like green, there's all kinds of green choices too. You know, we were playing with this feather falls a little bit ago, you know, that's kind of a spiller to hang over the edge. Well, sweet, you don't want, I don't like yellow or white. Let's do some green. We can do the same thing, get great texture, and have just a green version, a similar growth habit for the same purpose, okay? Now, if I show you just a couple other, maybe a little bit more sunnier options, and then we'll do some questions here. You know, I'm going to show you a couple of different shrubs. Now, these are things, again, I'm probably choosing as a thriller, the centerpiece of a container that I'm going to have in more sun than shade, but something that's got some evergreen, some presence, and maybe some cool foliage as well. So an easy one, and probably a popular choice around here, especially for bigger containers, is something like the Japanese hollies. Now, sky pencil, Japanese holly, I won't talk you out of that. It's been around for years. There's columnar boxwood. This is a newer one that's a little bit tighter. It's got a pretty boring name called straight and narrow. You should be able to remember that one. Hey, he was talking about this straight and narrow plant. Well, there you go. You know, I want stiff, green, upright structure that I can enjoy as a thriller, and then again, work off of that with different colors. You know, again, pop the colors in contrast. I put something yellow up against that, purple up against that, and I start working my thriller, my fillers, and do some spillers, depending on your container color that you're working on. That might be an option for you if you just want something easy and green. You know, maybe we want to pop with something variegated. You know, we look at a plant like variegated Pieris. This is passion frost. You know, if I look at that real close, you can see all those flower buds just sitting there here in the fall. This is a plant to me that says spring is coming, spring is coming, spring is coming. And then 3 months later, oh, there's some flowers coming out on that. So this is one, again, great foliage, nice flower in the spring, but something I could tuck in as a thriller maybe, or a filler in a large container and have a shrub that I can enjoy for a few years in a pot and then go ahead and move it out into my yard to enjoy in the landscape. So a lot of variegated plants like Pieris, for example. Nandinas, you know, we call heavenly bamboos. They're not bamboos by any means, but as we get to fall, you can see the reds, the burgundies, there's orangier ones. There's all kinds of options for Nandinas. It's a great little indestructible dwarf little evergreen shrub that again would pop as a nice filler in a lot of containers. This is one called Burgundy Wine, a little more purplish burgundy colored leaves in the winter. We look at Bonfire, we like red, we can do Gulf Streams, kind of more coppery, orangey, all kinds of options depending on, again, your taste and what color you like in the pot. One of my favorite little tuck-ins is this little twig, a box honeysuckle. This is a little plant called Twiggy. That's a cool little plant. Look at that color on there. It's got great texture. That's a really fun plant, I think, to tuck in as a little filler. It grows slow. Looks great in the landscape too. I've got some in my yard, but that's a kind of a miniature little box honeysuckle that would be evergreen, give me some yellowy, orangey, goldy colors in the winter. It's got great texture with those little small leaves. We just got a bunch of these, and I think that's a great addition to think about for the fall. And then maybe a couple of evergreen perennials. You know, let's say we're doing something real hot, real dry. You know, consider plants like Euphorbia. There's all kinds of different Euphorbias that got great foliage color and stay evergreen. I think this is this one of the red ones? There's Ruby Glow. So that would give me some purple, nice little flower coming out of winter as well. Ones like Ascot Rainbow would give me some nice variegations. We could do ones that have a little more blue hint to them, darker red, all kinds of Euphorbias. But, you know, we started off early talking about, you know, water likes. You know, what could I plant in a container that all likes dry, hot sun? Euphorbia would be a great choice that would go with the sedums and some of this hotter things that I don't have to worry about maybe watering quite as much. Okay. A couple of twigs. Now, you know, I wouldn't probably ever recommend planting a container that was all deciduous. I mean, to me, you know, having a deciduous element in it's fine, but we would want some evergreen things in there. Certainly mixing the two together is fine. But when I, of course, say deciduous, I mean, we got no leaves in the wintertime. So I brought up one option. You know, I love Japanese maples myself, even though they're dormant in the winter without leaves. I've still got structure. I've got bark color on some of them. It's a cool plant to me in my own taste. Maybe not yours. You're like, well, I don't mind deciduous, but give me something that pops in the winter. Well, take a look at some of the twig dogwoods. You know, twig dogwood is a plant that does grow a little faster, probably won't last a long time in the container, you know, a season or two. But I can pick red twig, yellow twig, or this is midwinter fire, kind of orange twig. You can see fall color starting. When this drops its leaves, I'm going to have some cool color that pops, you know, depending on your location where you have it. I've got a dark house, and I've used these against the siding here in containers over the years. And that orangey red color really pops in the winter. Then I can use evergreen things around it, some pansies, and I've, again, got a really attractive planter over the winter. So ones like midwinter fire, maybe you like variegated foliage, that would still look really cool in the summer. You can see it starting to turn leaves, but now I've got bright red stems to enjoy during the winter months. So again, maybe a simple deciduous plant might catch your eye too if we've got some twig color with it, something like twig dogwood. Now, last thing I'll show you, just a couple conifers here. You know, and again, at the beginning, I showed you that big fancy pink bag, you know, that was the acid planting mix. You know, again, if I'm doing a conifer, you know, and sticking mainly with acid-loving plants, you certainly can use that soil mixture as an option. It's going to give you some built-in acidity. All these will do just as fine in regular potting soil. They're not going to struggle. I want to make sure that's clear. If I'm doing this container with all acid-loving plants for long-term, yes, I'm going to go buy that pink bag. That's what I do. If I'm planting a blueberry, yes, I'm going to go buy that pink bag. But I can still, you know, take a conifer, mix the mom, mix the cat, whatever I want, and use regular potting soil. You don't have to get crazy. Which one do I buy? Either one's going to be fine. Okay. So if I show you just a couple conifers, you know, again, this is probably the #1 planted plant I see every gardener walk out of here for a thriller. This is Monterey Cypress, a little plant called Wilma Goldcrest. Beautiful chartreusey, limey, gold color, depending on how much sun you get. But it's just going to be that straight up, nice color, nice soft texture, really easy plant to use as a thriller. And then again, pop different textures off of it. So that's your Monterey Cypress. Maybe I want something maybe a little faster growing, a little bit taller, that again doesn't get so big. We would look for something a little bit more columnar, like Irish Yew is a great choice. This is the yellow variegated one. I can do this in dark green as well if you don't like yellow. But if we look at some of the yews, that would make a great little centerpiece. This is what I have in the gigantic ferns on my own patio, and they've been in there for 10 years now. Dig out the flowers, put in summer, about to put pansies in for the winter, and I'll probably still keep them for a few more years. They'll last a long time in containers. But yews might be a good choice for you as well. If we look at Cryptomeria, I don't think a lot of people know Japanese cedars or they need to discover them. But really interesting needle. If I get that up close to the camera, I'm hoping you can see the texture. That's totally different, you know, than a pine, a spruce, what you think of as an evergreen. You know, Cryptomeria has got kind of ropey foliage. It's a little different structure, but there's some really cool upright ones. This is one called Black Dragon. So I could have that in my container as a thriller. It's super dark green through the winter months again, then plant some things around it and have a really nice container. But that's one called Black Dragon. Lots of other options for Cryptomeria or Japanese cedar as well. If we look at some cypresses, you know, this is a fun one here. You can see again that nice upright shake with great texture. This is one we call Whistle Saguaro. Think of that cactus, you know, with the two arms coming up. This is one as we grow, I'm going to get some really cool arms, and this does kind of look like a saguaro cactus a little bit for structure. I could prune this if I want. It loves heat. It doesn't mind dry. But options like this, again, maybe that plant, turn away from the tag, maybe that plant catches your eye as, again, a cool thriller. Lots of options that I can put around it as fillers and then spillers going forward. Last couple here, this is whipcord. Now, if you look at that, almost looks like dreadlocks, kind of a fun little bad haircut if I had hair. But this one looks like it's a western red cedar. Doesn't grow super huge, but this is one I'm going to have some really cool texture. And this turns kind of bronze in the winter, so a little bit of color as well. But being a western red cedar, won't mind some wet, really easy to grow. It doesn't overpower the container. So this is another one would look pretty cool to me, mixed in as kind of a filler plant on different containers. And maybe if you like yellow, and again, we like a little dry, this is a Hanoki Cypress. Lots of options for good Hanoki Cypresses. Most of them like pure sun. Melody is this yellow one that'll form a little Christmas tree shape to it as it gets older. This is one here that doesn't mind the part sun, part shade. I wouldn't go shade, but certainly in the morning sun or just afternoon sun, the other day half of shade, this is something that's going to pop with that color, and it's got great texture too. So this is one here. This is a little starter plant. I could have brought in a big one, and we got even bigger ones. Maybe I want to start with something a little bigger and then use it as a thriller, but we could do that either way, okay? Well, that's a lot of plants. Let me see if I probably got enough of them done here. I think we only left like one or two. So I'm just going to mention a couple things, then we got plenty of time for questions. With the class, like always, we've always got great sales going for the folks that take the time. Hopefully I taught you a couple things a day, some good tips. Maybe you caught a plant or two that caught your eye. You got to run. I have to have that for my pot. That's what these classes are all about. Hopefully teaching you some success for your own container gardening. 20% off potting soil. So Edna's Best with the potting soil we have on special this week. You tell me you're at the class, the cashier hits the magic button, you got 20% off the potting soil. And don't tell anybody else that wasn't at the class, but like I said, all plants can grow in pots. So we made this real easy this week. You can come down and buy any plant on the property and get 20% off. This could be out in the nursery, grasses, perennials, annuals. Well, I'm going to grow it in a pot. Sweet, you got 20% off. So we tell them at you the class, and we get you the 20% discount on all plants, period. Okay? So that's an easy one for the sale. You saw me mention the sluggo earlier. It's a great time. I'm thinking about the same thing in my yard, getting slug bait down in the fall so that I don't have as much issues in the spring. Sluggo's on special all month too. $14.99 is a great price. for the 2.5 pound sluggo. A little bit of that goes a long ways. That would be a great special as well. The last thing I'd mention is, you know, if you're a regular here at Sunnyside, we've done this for years. This is my, I think, 11th year. Time flies when you're having fun running this place. But Steve and Pauline, the owners, have always been really generous with the community, and we always have this customer appreciation event in the fall. We're going to kick it off this year, September 20th, Monday. The sales and the specials and things will run that entire week through that next Sunday, the 26th. So watch your email. Details will probably start coming out this week, but it'll be a fun week. We'll have extra staff around, you know, kind of celebrate the fall and gardening together. Hopefully have a chance to say thank you for being a loyal Sunnyside customer, and have some great discounts around here as well. So watch your emails this week. We'll have some great specials going for a customer appreciation week coming up. We typically barbecue, have cake, and all kinds of other fun. We'll get back to that at some point, but I'm sure you can guess with the way the world is still right now. Can't be having everybody touching food and cramming in line to grab hot dogs. So we'll get back to it here at some point, but we're just going to have lots of raffles and free giveaways and some great sales and some fun stuff for the kids around here too. Okay. I'm getting tired of talking, so the last thing I'll say is, if you want to learn lawns, tomorrow is lawn class day. So I am the OCD lawn guy, and I've got some fun pictures to show you. I've got a little battle going on in my yard with 3 raccoon deviants that are destroying my turf the last month. I'll show you some pictures of that tomorrow too, but we'll talk about how to get your lawn rejuvenated and looking perfect here for fall and heading into 2022. So hopefully tomorrow at 11, you'll choose to join us for lawn class. That's always one of my favorites to teach here at the nursery. Okay. So with that, I actually made it on time even, Nicole. That's a miracle. I'm going to let Nicole take over, and we'll see what kind of questions we got here.
Hopefully you are familiar with our classes, but we always record these because there is a lot of information, and it's always good to go back and, you know, rehear some of the things that maybe sparked your interest the first time, or maybe taking notes, things went too fast, or certain plants that you want to check out. Anyway, we always record them. We post them on our YouTube channel, so subscribe to that, and that way you get instant notifications when new content goes up. And we also put them up on our website too. Same thing with the class handouts. We've got all the past classes and their handouts attached to our website, so you should check that out. It's a really good resource for lots of information there. So we've got some good questions, some of them that, you know, I have personal experience with too, specifically pansies, because they're a great fall and winter plant, but they tend to get a little leggy. How do you keep them looking their best and not spindly and crazy?
Well, keeping them in as much sun as possible, I think, is a big part of it. You know, I'd never tuck pansies in shade. You're asking probably for mildew with the heavy dews and the rain around here. If you can pinch them back, it's really hard with pansy because you come down, you buy a nice little plant, and you're like, well, what is he telling me to take some flowers out of it? But I'll be honest, when I plant mine, I typically reach in the stalks and I'm like, I'm cool if I don't see a flower for a couple weeks because I want it to branch and stay low and dense. You know, then I got multiple flowers, and deadheading them will help them through the winter too. I'm not out every day. You know, even OCD guys probably once every couple weeks. I'll just walk along the window boxes and the different planters all around the yard and just do a little bit of deadheading, because if I can pinch that spent flower out, A, it's not going to tell it to go to seed. I'm going to get a bloom quicker. And B, I'm going to keep that foliage a little bit more compact and down. Now, violas will probably always be a little bit more compact than pansies. Maybe you can have not the big happy face flower, just a little mini version, and do viola. Might help you keep it a little bit lower. But I would say, again, the sun, pinching them back and deadheading them a little bit. And honestly, you know, come next, you know, mid-April, pansies are getting to be done. We get warmer. Pansies don't do the heat as much. So when I take mine out of the pots and replace them with geranium, petunia, whatever I do for summer, I'll usually go relocate them and plant them along a border in part shade, part sun, really pinch them back, throw some food on them, and typically you can get the pansies going almost year round doing it both ways.
So speaking of food, we talked about, making sure you add compost and food to your containers. How often do you need to refresh your compost and or feed them? How do you know when to do that?
When I'm planting, if I set up the soil structure right, you're good to go. You're not having to go back and add soil per se. I always typically take a pure compost and kind of mulch mine when I do them originally. I like the look of it better than potting soil. It doesn't really matter if you do or you don't. But if I put food down when I plant it in the winter months, I would try to go about every 6 weeks. And again, it's the granular, the pink bag, EB Stone rose and flower food. If you wanted to add a little bit of that lavender bag, the Ultra Bloom, just for flower, a little bit of that will work as well. But if I do that when I plant here, the next couple weeks when I redo my containers, maybe it's every 6 weeks, through the winter. And we get to next spring, things are warming up, a little more actively growing. Now I can do this a little bit more often, or again, maybe I swap to a water soluble like the sea grow that we use here.
What about, you usually talk about this, but what about planting bulbs underneath your plants?
Well, I was going to bring that up today, but I'm saving that for the bulb class here in a couple weeks. That's exactly what I do, to be honest with you. If you join me for the bulb class, I actually bring a couple of the pots from my home down here, and we'll be planting an incredible amount of bulbs in a tiny little pot. How's that for a teaser, right? It's a great way to go. I mean, if you're doing a pretty simple pot, it's a perfect time. You could tuck a couple daphs, tulips, whatever underneath there as a base layer. They'll find their way up come springtime, and you will have a little bulb accent there as well. I'll be doing a planter that is all about bulbs. I mean, I got spare pots all over the place at my place. So typically, if you're empty in the winter, I'm going to go down and buy some cool bulbs, fill you full of bulbs so that I can enjoy it for a number of months come springtime. Then I can take the bulbs and go transplant them in my yard if I want to keep them as well.
So we get this question when we talk about containers a lot, and kind of to make it more generalized, how do you choose the right container for something that is not an annual, say Japanese maples? Everybody loves those and wants to put those in containers, but how do you know if you have a container large enough to sustain it, at least for a little while?
Well, that's a great question, because it's a tough one to give you a simple answer for, but let me put it this way. So speaking as one who's made this mistake on a number of experiences, because ultimately gardening is trial and error. I made the error, you get to learn from it. How's that? So when I pick out pots now, I love frost-proof containers. I don't know, I couldn't even count how many pots I got around my landscape, on the deck, all over the place. But when I pick out a pot, the coolest stuff, vases back up on the top, and it's got a narrower opening, and it looks like an art piece. Great looking pot, but good luck getting a tree back out of there in a few years that I can go and transplant in my yard. I'm still have 2 left that I'm going to be like, well, I got to break the pot or the tree, or one of them's going to lose here when I got to redo it someday. But that's part of it, is I would say, look at the shape, and I would always get something that sides go straight up. If I start fluting back in and getting narrow, it looks incredible. It's a great looking container. But at some point, you're going to have to make a choice. How am I going to sawzall that thing out of there and get it out of that small hole without damaging the tree? Or I got to take the sledgehammer to the pot and save my tree. It's going to be one or the other. Now, if you're talking about size, that's a really tough question to answer, except for you specifically. If you have a particular maple, you say, I have whatever, I've got a bloodgood, I want to grow in a container. Well, bloodgood gets 20 feet tall and grows a little faster. So unless we had a massive container, I'd be happy for quite a few years. I'm not going to buy a little 16-inch pot and plant a bloodgood maple in it and expect it to last for 2 or 3 years. It would be very lucky to last that long. So knowing what plant it is going to be huge. But say, if you kind of do this, my rule with maples, and I got a lot of them in pots, is I'm like 2 by 2. So if I pick a typical dwarf, a semi-dwarf, even a good container maple, not a gigantic coral bark, a bloodgood, something that grows big, but a cool tree that I could have for 10 years in a container. If I buy a 2 by 2 maybe even a little bigger than that, I'm going to get probably 10 years out of it. I mean, that's kind of been my experience over the last 20, 25 years is if I get a cool dwarf container one, I get a decent sized pot, frost proof, it won't ever crack. I can have it in there for a long time. And that's an easy thing. Wintertime comes, I tip it over. Maybe I start cutting around the edge a little bit to loosen it. I can pop that out, go put it in my yard. Then my wife's always really happy when I bring home another maple to plant in that container. So now you can kind of feed the circle of addiction of maples that way. That's what I do. So, you know, I don't want to sound vague, but email me what you're thinking about. Is it a particular variety? Is it a different plant? A conifer is kind of the same business. You know, a lot of people ask about rhododendrons. I love rhodies. You know, I use them all over my yards. I don't do them in pots as much, but say you wanted to. Well, if I'm a rhodie, I'm shallow and wide. So maybe I find a, you know, big, shallow, wide bowl. Yeah, I could grow a rhodie in there for a long time if I had the right shape. If I buy a little narrow vase, not going to last much long at all because I don't have any room for those roots to spread.
So are there specific like signifiers that let you know when it is time to move it out of the pot? Or are there things you can look for?
That's another great question. I mean, I would always, as a gardener, whether you got one container or 50 like me, I'm going to be out there kind of mid-late winter, and I'm going to check all of them. If I've got a permanent plant, maple, conifer, I don't care what it is, I'm always looking at that container, and I'm going to go right to the edge, and I'm going to take a couple fingers, and if I can stick them in the soil, and I've got some room, great, I'm probably okay. If I'm like, wait a minute, I got a root that's going in a circle, and I can't much get in there anymore, and it's going to be probably time, either I've got to take it out of there, do a little bit of root pruning, get some fresh soil in, replant it. I'm probably okay for a couple more years doing it that way, but you've got to check them to me every winter. You know, if I planted one the first year, I'm not worried about it. But as the years go by, I'll be checking all mine again here in probably February because it's easy to tip things over in the winter, slide them out, do my pruning, replant them, or put them in the yard and have something new to put in as well. It's a great time without taking a chance to losing anything, doing it that way.
So I know this question you could talk about for a really long time and there's going to be lots of options, but just to narrow down some of your tops, because everybody loves Japanese maple so much, and especially for containers, do you have some of your top favorites that are good for containers? Specifically, somebody asked for like reds.
Reds?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, I'll mention a couple here in a second, but I would say this, you know, we've got our maple list on the website. I spend a lot of time every winter kind of going through and marking things with a symbol, great for containers that would maybe last a little longer. So I would obviously steer you towards that list as a starting point. The new one will be up here. Nicole and I will probably get to it sometime in November, December, and we'll get it back up for 2022 because there'll be some new ones. But if I was going to mention a couple, again, I'm looking for long-term for me. I want something I can have for probably 10 years, develop it into a beautiful specimen that then would be perfect out in my landscape. I donate some trees down to the Arboretum in Everett. You know, there's always an option. I'm not going to cut it down, throw it in the yard waste and start over again. That'd be a waste of a cool maple. So if I'm looking at dwarf, maybe a few that at the top of my head, you might look at like Cynthia's Jewel, Makawa, Yatsubusa is a beautiful one. If you were going to go red, you know, that's a little tougher color for a dwarf, but like I have a bushy red one I love in a big black container right out in front of my house. It's called Candy Kitchen with 2 Ks, Candy Kitchen. There's probably 3 that are really close to that. Elizabeth's another one. Jaime Sojo's another one you'll see on our list marked like that. Maybe I want just a little bit bigger and kind of a mushroom shape. You might look at one called Rhode Island Red. That's another great slow growing one that, yes, down the road would get pretty big, but in a container is a great one for a long time. There's lots of cool variegated ones if you've got shade. You know, maples is one of those things we could probably find about 1,000, you know, named cultivars of all shapes and sizes, deep shade, part sun, full sun, red, variegated yellow. You can pick any color you want. Look at that list. It's probably a good starting point for you. And then watch your, you know, late winter. It'll be up before January, and we would have our new list up for 2022. And there will be plenty of good options for containers as well.
Excellent. Great job condensing that.
For 5 minutes on that.
I know. So shifting gears, if you have containers that getting water to it is kind of a challenge, are there some good drought tolerant plants that do well in containers?
Yeah, I mentioned quite a few during the class. Some of the conifers like the cypresses, pines, the spruce. If I was looking for something more evergreen, those would all be great choices. There's a bunch of good drought tolerant perennials. I mean, we popped up. Let me just look around here and find a few to show you. If we're going for sun, look at, we showed a couple Euphorbias. Those are awesome. That could go with sedums and some stuff you wouldn't have to water very much. We showed like the whistle saguaro, the cypress, Hanoki Cypress, very, very drought tolerant. Those are all good choices. Nandina, if you wanted something a little more foliagey, the Nandinas are super drought tolerant. That'd be another great choice. You're going to struggle, I'll be honest, if it's out where you don't get a lot of water. If it gets rain, great. You're covered in the winter. You're not going to have to worry about it. We can do pansies. But if I'm in the spring and you're asking me this question, what can I plant in there that I don't have to water all summer? That's going to be a little tougher answer. Once in a while, I got to touch these up. If you had any of the stuff I just showed you, I don't think you're going to touch it once this winter. If it gets out where it gets a little bit of rain here and there and not underneath an eave, or a deck or somewhere that it's blocked out from the open air and rain, you're not going to have to touch this much at all here until we get to probably next May, kind of thing.
Excellent. We get this question all the time, and I know that it's a tricky one, but things that deer do not love that can go in your containers.
Well, deer will nibble on just about anything, but there's plenty of, we mentioned a bunch of evergreens. There's plenty of evergreen choices that they will not touch. It's a really, I think we're going to talk about this when we do this schedule. We're probably going to end up having a deer class next year because this question comes up in every class. But what I would tell you is this, because I could sit here and spew off 80 things and you won't remember half of them. Go online, just type in real easy in your search engine, Pacific Northwest, Western Washington, deer-proof plants. There's a bunch of great websites, the Conservation District, Native Plant Society, Western Garden Books got an entire section donated to deer, annuals, perennials, shrubs, ground covers. You can go through all the list. A lot of that stuff would be great to use in containers, but that would give you something where you could literally look along there and say, "Ooh, I know that plant, I like it," and pick out a variety of it that way.
Excellent. Good resources. So I think this is our last one, unless anybody pops any more up in the chat. But what about some climbers, specifically for fall?
Yeah. There's a lot of great climbers, and I had a plot like this a few years ago. I ended up getting, vines get pretty big, and we've got to get it into the ground. And mine is in the ground now. But you could set up a nice large container. I bought a really cool metal art piece, kind of a rusty obelisk that I wanted, and I trained in climbing hydrangea up it for a number of years. Got so big, root bound, those get a lot of roots, so it went into my landscape. And I just didn't do another vine in there. But if you're okay with maybe a little shorter lifespan in a container, or getting a very large one like half whiskey barrel, something like that size, we can really grow any vine in a pot. If we're talking about fall and winter in particular, fall color, the Boston ivies, the Virginia creeper, things like that would turn to brilliant color are probably more for fall. Fall blooming clematis, sweet autumn clematis would be another one. I would look more towards evergreen vines. If I'm trying to get a permanent year-round container, maybe it's evergreen clematis of some kind or another. That would give me the foliage all winter, really early spring bloom, late winter, white, fragrant would be a nice addition. Most of the vines are going to go dormant. So if you're okay with that, we can grow clematis, honeysuckle. I'd probably say no to the wisteria because that's going to get a little big a little quicker. But there's a lot of vine options that we could grow in a pot if you're okay with looking dead as a doornail in the winter. And so that's why, again, I chose climbing hydrangea for me as an example. I love the foliage of the variegated one. I have the one that they call Miranda or Firefly. And I didn't mind if it losed its leaves, because that's one particular plant that has really cool twisting stems and peely bark. So to me, it looked cool in the winter, even though it didn't have foliage. It goes back to kind of that bark interest that we talked about. So that was my choice. I'm guessing you probably want some foliage. So it's probably going to be down to plants like Evergreen Clematis, China Blue Vine, Holobelia, Akebia is a real common one. A lot of folks buy up here as well that would stay evergreen in the winter, not bloom or anything, but I would have the reward of the flower come springtime.
Great choices. We've covered a lot of ground today. I think that hopefully everybody got what they needed, but you know, questions come up or things that you forgot to ask, or maybe you're in the midst of planting something and you have a question, or like some of you have asked specific maples or specific plants and what kind of size pot you need. Shoot us an email. We're happy to have those chats with you, you know, one-on-one, whether it's phone call or email. That way you get the information that's specific to your situation. Trevor will be here all weekend. He can help answer your emails. And we have a great set of knowledgeable staff. Everybody, you know, helps and pitches in. So a lot of great information here. We're happy to share, like Trevor said, through our experiences, perhaps, you know, ones that didn't turn out so well. We'll help, you know, give that knowledge to you so that you don't have to make the same mistakes we have over the gardening years. Thanks for joining us today. We hope that we see you tomorrow as well for the lawn class. Our email address for those of you is Sunnyside Nursery, all one word, at msn.com. And our website is sunnysidenursery.net. So hopefully you can find us online, check out our YouTube channel, and we're happy to help. So thanks for joining us. We hope we'll see you tomorrow.